Hello friends! Today I am going to show you a couple of different kinds of trees. These trees that I'm going to show you, you've probably seen outside, maybe at your house, maybe somewhere else. And they are the trees that have green needles on them. You can see some behind me. So a lot of the time we might think of them as pine trees, or maybe if you think of a Christmas tree, if you celebrate Christmas. But these trees with these green kind of pointy needles, like this one, and here's another one. There are actually many different kinds, and all of those trees that have those green needles that stay on all winter long, those are called conifer trees. And they're called conifer trees because conifer kind of sounds like cone, conifer, cone. All of those trees that have needles, they all have cones. The pine trees have pine cones. Hemlock trees have green needles and they have a different kind of cone. So I'm going to show you a couple of different kinds of conifer trees. And I want to see if you can find them maybe near your house, maybe somewhere else if you go for a walk on a trail or go for a hike. And see if you can find these two kinds of conifer trees, trees with needles, okay, green needles. So this is the first one. This is called an eastern hemlock. And I'll show you what the needles look like. See how they're really short needles and they're flat. You can see how short these needles are when I hold them next to my thumb. And they also have these little tiny cones. You can see the wind is blowing this tree. See how little and tiny these cones are? I'll pick one. That is a tiny little cone, but this is a cone from an eastern hemlock. So this is a tall tree, and you can see the branch that I just showed you with those needles. Here's the actual trunk of the tree. That's really tall. So that is an eastern hemlock. We see a lot of those in Maine where we live and in other states nearby. Now I'm going to show you a different kind of conifer tree. And this tree is actually Maine's state tree, and it's the eastern white pine. So right behind me here, this is an eastern white pine, and they start off little, but they get really, 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 really tall. And so because it's kind of hard to see the needles way up at the top, here's what the trunk looks like. Kind of rough, chunky bark. Since it's hard to see the needles way up at the top, I'm going to show you a little baby eastern white pine so that you can see what the needles look like up close. So here is a little baby eastern white pine. And look how much longer those needles are than they are in the hemlock. And the easiest way that you can tell that it's an eastern white pine is if you count how many needles are in one little cluster. See how they're all in these little clusters of needles? If you pulled one of these off and you counted those needles, you can see there are 5 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 needles, and in the word white, for a white pine, W-H-I-T-E, there are 5 letters. So that is a way to help remember that this is an eastern white pine, 5 needles in a cluster. White pines also have much bigger cones. So look at this big cone compared to the little hemlock cone I showed you a minute ago. Here's another. I'll show you the difference in my hand. So there's a little tiny hemlock, eastern hemlock cone, and the big white pine cone. And a white pine can actually be, the cones can get even bigger than that. That's not even as big as my hand. Some of them can be bigger than my hand. So if you feel like being a nature detective the next time you go outside, see if you can find an eastern hemlock. Remember, the needles look like this, and the little tiny cones. And the trees can be really, really tall. And see if you can find the eastern white pine with the longer needles in clusters of 5 and a longer, bigger cone. And what you could do is even take a little twig, a little part of the hemlock branch, or a little cluster of the 5 needles, and you could tape it in your nature journal. All right, thanks. Have fun.